Before falling to chaos, the Iron Warriors were the 4th Legion of Space Marines. Masters of siege warfare, no legion could match their ruthless efficiency at assaulting static fortifications. This trait made them long-lasting rivals of the Imperial Fists Legion, who took pride in their ability to construct the finest static defences the Imperium had ever seen. It was this rivalry between the legions and their Primarchs Perturabo and Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists that aided the Iron Warriors' descent into chaos. Since the dark era of the Horus Heresy, the Iron Warriors are now one of the 9 first founding traitor legions of Chaos Space Marines, bound in service to the gods of chaos and fighting to overthrow the Imperium of Man. The Iron Warriors are known for augmenting parts of their body with cybernetic enhancements, much like the members of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Loyalist Iron Hands chapter of Space Marines. When gifted with a flesh-warping mutation from the Ruinous Powers, the Iron Warriors prefer to simply remove the afflicted appendage, be it an arm or a leg for example, replacing it with a superior mechanical one. Before the Heresy, the Iron Warriors were the Emperor's finest siege troops, and their Primarch Perturabo was Rogel Dawn's equal in the arts of fortification and strategy. However, Perturabo always felt as though he was overshadowed by his brother Primarch's achievements. Every one of Dawn's proud boasts was, to the Master of the Iron Warriors, a pointed insult. When the Horus Heresy came into full motion, it was perhaps inevitable that the 2 Primarchs found themselves on opposite sides of the galactic civil war. Perturabo grew up on the world of Olympia, an ancient planet in the far reaches of the Ultima Segmentum, on the opposing side of the galactic core from Terra. It was one of a number of worlds in the region thought to be colonized at some point during the Dark Age of technology. The surface of Olympia was dominated by almost unbroken mountainous terrain, which made large-scale urbanization and agriculture virtually impossible. These unique conditions led to a diverse patchwork of hundreds of independent settlements and cultures who fought endlessly over the most verdant mountain valleys in a shifting struggle of power and dominance. As a secular, opportunistic culture driven by the pursuit of wealth, security, and power, the Olympian arts of war in this fractious realm evolved towards a sublime mastery of fortress building and siegecraft. The expertly crafted bastions and strongholds were of colossal size and impregnable strength, and soon came to be the hallmark and measure of the greatest of the city-states and their rulers, the 12 most powerful which were known as the Tyrants of Olympia. When he was still an infant, Perturabo was found and brought before one of these tyrants, Damikos of the city-state of Lokos. He would then go on to raise him as his own. As Perturabo grew, so did his knowledge and skills of the culture of which he was immersed. Olympia's warring city-states provided ample opportunity to study both the theory and the practice of the highly specialized style of siege warfare. As the Emperor's Great Crusade reached the world of Olympia, Perturabo learned of his place in the wider galaxy and pledged his allegiance to the Imperium, devoting himself to the service of the Emperor. Assuming command of the Iron Warriors, Perturabo was now reunited with his gene sons. According to the established practice, the discovered Primarch was declared Lord of the world on which they had been raised, and the Iron Warriors began the process of inducting new recruits from the most able candidates of the Olympian population. In the wars that followed, the Iron Warriors proved themselves among the most capable siege troops in the Imperium. Perturabo's cold and calculating mind, as well as his upbringing on Olympia, made him well suited to the highly technical aspects of siege warfare. He possessed an innate understanding of advanced technology that rivaled even the highest placed adepts of the Mechanicum. The Iron Warriors received additional training on Mars, further refining this specialization, until only the Imperial Fists of Rogel Dawn could match their level of expertise. Under Perturabo's leadership, the Iron Warriors brought countless planets into Imperial compliance. Very few objected when faced with the prospect of a protracted siege by the Iron Warriors, as they knew they would otherwise have been devastated in a bitter and ultimately pointless war. Despite his incredible progress, Perturabo grew ever more resentful of his role within the Great Crusade, and to prove his superiority over Dawn and others among his brother Primarchs, he accepted ever more arduous missions on behalf of his legion. Heavily fortified worlds considered unbreakable were cracked open by the methodical application of overwhelming force. This unrelenting approach to war took a heavy toll even on the superhuman Space Marines. Grueling preparation culminated in brief but extreme violence. Soon, the Iron Warriors came to prefer besieged defenders to defy them rather than to simply surrender, so that the pent-up pressure of siege warfare could be released in the moment of their total defeat. To make matters worse, the Iron Warriors came to be utilised as garrison troops, small forces detached from the bulk of the Legion, tasked with guarding the worlds they had worked so hard to bring to Imperial compliance. His brother Primarchs would have refused outright to see their legion's precious resources squandered in such a way, but Perturabo reluctantly agreed. As the outbreak of the Horus Heresy approached, Perturabo was put under ever-increasing pressure, and as a result, his repressed anger and bitterness burst forth in a raging inferno. Perhaps it was the Warmaster Horus himself who engineered and manipulated such deployments, all as part of his plan to further Perturabo's sense of tremendous grievance. But whatever the case, the turning point came to light when the people of Olympia rebelled against the rule of the Iron Warriors, following the death of the Tyrant of Lokos. Perturabo's anger was finally unleashed, and upon returning to his homeworld, the Primarch enacted such fearsome vengeance that countless innocents were slaughtered and entire cities burned to the ground. In the aftermath of his vengeance, Perturabo was wrought with despair, and barely able to comprehend the crimes he had committed in his rage. But before he could set about righting his terrible deed, word came of the Warmaster's virus bombing of Istvan III, and the Iron Warriors were ordered to confront the rebels and bring them to justice. Records are scarce of the plots and schemes Horus must have enacted in order to turn the bitter Perturabo to the cause of the traitors, but whatever events took place, the Iron Warriors turned upon their brothers at Istvan V, and in doing so, sealed their damnation for all eternity. Released from his previous constraints, Perturabo was free to pursue his most destructive urges, laying waste to world after world in the Warmaster's service. While one part of his legion turned Olympia and its surrounding star systems into an empire of iron, another lent its expertise to the siege of Terra, and at last the sons of Perturabo could truly test themselves against those of Rogel Dawn. It's still unknown whether Dawn's masterfully constructed defences would have proved the undoing of the Iron Warriors, for the Warmaster had fallen in battle before the matter could be fully determined. Those Iron Warriors that had taken part in the siege of Terra fled into the Eye of Terror with the remainder of the traitors, while those that had established their own empire around Olympia prepared themselves for the inevitable counter-offensive by the Loyalist legions. In a reversal of fortune, it was the Imperial Fists who were now laying siege to the Iron Warrior fortifications. After a series of campaigns, the traitors were eventually dislodged, but only after detonating their nucleonic stockpiles, which reduced their former homeworld of Olympia to a shattered wasteland. The most fabled of all Perturabo's campaigns took place on the world of Sebastus V. It was on this planet that he chose to construct the most fearsome fortification the Imperium had ever faced, the Eternal Fortress. It was a mighty stronghold surrounded on all sides by mile after mile of trenches, bunker systems, turret emplacements, minefields and jagged razor wire. While most fortresses served the purpose of defending a location of high importance, the Eternal Fortress had been built for a single purpose: to defy the proud boasts of Rogel Dawn and to lure him into a trap from which there was no escape. Despite the protests of Rabute Guilliman of the Ultramarines, Dawn succumbed to Perturabo's boast that none could take his fortress and led the entire Imperial Fist Legion into what would later become known as the Iron Cage, a conflict that would result in death and destruction on an unprecedented scale. Not since the height of the Horus Heresy had a Space Marine Legion suffered such heavy losses as the Imperial Fists incurred as they plummeted straight into the midst of a grand entrapment. As more of his warriors were cut down to the well-prepared strategy of the Iron Warriors, Dawn's captains counselled the Legion should fall back and regroup, for they could accept what their Primarch could not. The Imperial Fists had been bested in a siege. Stubborn and reluctant to yield, Rogel Dawn could not admit defeat and refused to give the order to withdraw. Rabute Guilliman could not stand idle as the Imperial Fists were erased from existence, and so he chose to intervene and deployed the Ultramarines as a relief force. Faced with the combined strength of 2 entire legions, Perturabo evacuated the Iron Warriors, knowing he'd achieved what he'd set out to do. By the end of the battle, the Imperial Fist's numbers had been severely depleted, but thanks to the Ultramarines, the Sons of Dawn had survived. After retreating back to the Eye of Terror to rejoin the remainder of his legion, Perturabo offered up the precious, uncorrupt gene seed his legion had taken from the Imperial Fists to the gods of chaos for the use of the traitor legions. His reward was a dark blessing that ascended him to a demon prince. In the 41st millennium, the Iron Warriors remain a constant thorn in the side of the Emperor's realm. Warbands of Perturabo's sons, under command of warsmiths, strike out into real space from their demon world of Medrengard in the Eye of Terror, seeking new spoils and technology to enhance their own capabilities. The Iron Warriors have been working closely with the heretics of the Dark Mechanicum and have proven capable of unleashing fiendishly potent new demon engines to wreak havoc upon the servants of the Imperium.